Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Dalid. We are in the middle of a tangent of statements that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav. This has nothing to do with Edim Zomamin or Makkot. This following law has to do with how to make a kosher mikveh. V'amar Rav Yehuda amar Rav, Sheloshet lugin mayim, shenafal letochan kortob shel yayin umarehen kemarei yayin, v'naflu lemikveh lo pesaluhu. So first, a little bit of background to how to make a mikveh. In order to make a kosher mikveh, the first 40 se'ah that goes into that pool has to be from rain water. 40 se'ah is about 100 gallons, more or less. And that has to be rainwater. Once you fill up a pool with 40 se'ah of rainwater, then you can add mayim she'uvin. That's drawn water, like from a bucket. And you can add as much as you want. Even if you have a giant pool, and the first 40 se'ah that falls in is from rainwater, and then after that, that's totally kosher. Any water that you add in actually becomes kosher as part of the mikveh the second it touches the 40 se'ah that you first put in there. Good, that's a simple case. Now, what if there's a little bit of drawn water while you're filling up the first 40 se'ah? That's also okay, as long as it's less than 3 log. Log is about a cupful, so 3 log, let's say, is a small bottle full of water compared to 100 gallons. And so, if you have a little bit of drawn water, let's say the sides are a little bit wet, or a cup full of water falls in while you're filling it up from the rainwater, as long as it's less than 3 log, that's okay, even within the first 40 se'ah. If it's more than 3 log, and it hasn't been filled up to 40 se'ah yet, so while you're waiting for the rain to come to fill up to 40 se'ah, more than 3 log fall in, then that mikveh is no good. Even if you have a ton of rain after it, it won't help because it's more than 3 log in the beginning. You have to drain all that out and then start all over again. All right, that's the basic background. Now we're talking about other liquids. The law is other liquids that fall into it don't count. Like if milk falls into it or wine, then we ignore that. It's as if it wasn't there. And so you could just keep going and keep filling it up. So if it's incomplete mikveh and some milk, some wine falls in, just keep filling it up. That's okay. Only more than 3 logim of water will make it pasul, but not of other liquids. Okay, now is where it gets complicated. What if it's part water and part something else? So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, if you have 3 log of mayim, okay, you have a bottle full of water, if that water would fall into the mikveh, it's an incomplete mikveh, then the mikveh would be no good. But before that bottle of water falls into the mikveh, there's a little bit of wine, a kortob. Kortob is a very small amount. It's a 24th of 1 log. So it's really just like a capful of wine goes into that bottle of water and makes it look like wine, because even a little bit of wine will make a purple color to a bottle of water. And then that mixture that looks like wine all falls into the mikveh. It does not make the mikveh pasul. Why? But there's more than 3 log of water that fell in. That's okay, because since the wine fell into it and it looks like wine, we consider this whole thing to be wine. All right? It looks like wine. So if someone would say this, they would say, oh, this is mixed wine. And that's okay. It's not considered water. So it's okay if it falls in. Just add more water, add more rainwater, and then it'll be good. That is Rav's statement. Now we have a challenge. Matkif la Rav Kahana. V'chi ma ben ze le seba ditnan. Rabbi Yosef Omer. Me seba poslin et hamikveh b'shloshet lugin. So Rav Kahana asks, this is why it's in the series from before. These are all statements that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav beforehand Shemuel. Rav Kahana challenges it, Rav answers it. So that's why it's in the series. Okay, so Rav Kahana asks from a Mishnah in Mikvaot, where Rabbi Yosef says, dyed water. So this is water, and you put some dye. Let's say blue dye, because you're going to put some clothing in it to dye the clothing. So you have blue water, colored water, and that water falls into a mikveh, and it's 3 log of water that has a little bit of dye in it. Then the mikveh is no good. So this seems to be the same case. What's the difference if it's a little bit of wine that falls into a bottle of water, or a little bit of blue dye that falls into a bottle of water? water. And this Mishnah says, poslin, the mikveh is no good. You got to drain it and start all over again. That's a good challenge. Amar le Rava, hatam mayad siba'a mikreh, hacha chamra miziga mikreh. Rava says it's different. In the case of colored water, what do you call colored water? Colored water. It's water. It just happens to have a color. So since the name of it is still water, so it's still considered water, and 3 log or more of water that fall into an incomplete mikveh makes it pasul. Whereas with the wine, what do you call this bottle that had water and with wine mixed into it? You call it diluted wine. It's called wine. This is a normal thing. When you have wine, you dilute it with water. So it's still called wine. Since the name of it, when ask anybody, what is this? They would say wine. Therefore, it's not water. And therefore, even more than even 3 log or more, as long as it looks like wine, it is called wine, and it does not make the mikveh pasul. Very good. Now we have another opinion. We have a baraita in the name of Rabbi Chia that says in the same case of wine, a little bit of wine that falls into a bottle of water, and then that gets mixed up, and then that bottle of water that looks like wine falls into the mikveh, 3 login, he says, it ruins the mikveh. You got to drain it and start all over again. So now we seem to have a contradiction. Rav said one thing, but the baraita of Rabbi Chia said something else. Is Rav going against this baraita? It's true. Rav is a Tanahu. He could go against it, but we're wondering if he in fact did, or maybe we can reconcile it. Amar Rava la kashya ha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri ha Rabbanan. Rava says, in fact, these 2 statements are following the same machloket as 2 Tanaim. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Rav will follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, whereas Rabbi Chia will follow Rabbanan in the following Mishnah. Let's see the Mishnah in Masechet Mikvaot. Titnan Sheloshet lugin mayim chaser kortob. This case is a little bit different, literally a little bit. Here, there's a bottle full of water, but the bottle doesn't have 3 login in it. It has 2.9 lugin, just a little bit less, 1 kortov less than. It's more than 2.9, 2.99 of water in it. So you have 3 lugin, less a little bit, we'll just call it 2.9. Shenafal tochan kortov yayin umarehen kemare yayin, and a little bit of wine fell into that. And now, once that little bit of wine, let's say 0.1 of wine falls into it, and now it's 3 altogether. But the water content of it was a little bit less than 3 login. So that's how this is a little bit different from the previous case. Rav said in Rav's case, he was starting off with 3 full lugin of water, and then a little bit of wine was added to that. Okay. And this whole now mixture of 3 lugin that includes a little bit of wine falls into the mikveh. Lo pisaluhu. That's okay. That mikveh is okay. So let's pause here to see that this is the statement of Tana Kama, and we can see that Tana Kama is already different from Rav, because it sounds like the Tana Kama here only says it's okay because there was less than 3 login of water itself, right? If we would ignore the little bit of wine that's in it, it's less. But what if it was 3 login of water? Then he would say it's no good. So you see that the Tana Kama agrees with Rabbi Chia that 3 log of water with some wine, even if it has some wine added onto it and it looks like wine, still is no good. Whereas Rav said 3 login of wine, 3 login of water plus wine, that's okay. And so that's already we see that the Tanakh Kama and the Rabbi Chia will fit together, because Tanakh Kama here only permits it if it's less than 3 login of water. Vechen, the Mishnah continues and gives another case. Shelosha login mayim chaser kortob shenafal tochan kortob halav. Umarehen kemare mayim v'naflu lemikveh lo pesaluhu. And also, if you have 3 login of water, less a little bit of water, so 2.9 of water, and then a little bit of milk fell in. So milk case is different from the wine case because the milk doesn't give a lot of color. If you put a tiny bit of milk into a bottle of water, it's going to look clear. It's not going to look purple. So therefore it says, and it looks like water. So now we're having even an extra chidush, even though it does not look like wine, but since you started off with less than 3 log of water, and it falls into the mikveh, it's not pasul, because even though the milk in this case mixes in with the water and you can't even see the milk anymore, it doesn't look like milk, that's still okay. So this is actually an added chidush, which would mean that in the previous case, even if a tiny bit of wine fell in and it doesn't look like wine, it doesn't matter. The point of the Mishnah, Tanakama in the Mishnah, is that as long as you started off with less than 3 log of water, plus a little bit of another liquid, we ignore that other liquid. Whether it gives it color or doesn't give it color doesn't matter, but rather all that matters is the amount. But if you start off with 3 login, then it also doesn't matter what color it looks like. Even if it looks like wine, then that will make it pasul, and that will fit with the bichiyah. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri omer hakol holech achar hamar'eh. So continuing the Mishnah, the minority opinion, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, we follow what it looks like. We're not going to follow the amount of it. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is actually being more lenient in this reading. And he says, even if you started off with 3 full login of water, and then you added some wine, and now the whole thing looks like wine, and it goes in, you call that wine, and therefore you can ignore all that 3 login of wine, even though it's mixed with a lot of water, but it looks like wine, and it's okay. So we see the Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri fits perfectly with Rav. That's exactly what Rav said. He also said, if you start with 3 login of water, 3 full login, but you have wine, and now it looks like wine, we call it wine, and then it's okay, because we go by the look. With milk, it would not be the same, because when you add milk in, then it looks like water. You can't see anything at all. Good. So Rava is able to resolve, and says Rav and Rabbi Chaya are actually arguing along the same lines as Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and the Tanakama. Now we ask another question. Ha mi ba'ya ba'e la Rav Papa, de ba'e Rav Papa. This answer that Rava just gave to resolve this machloket, this was actually a question by Rav Papa, and Rav Papa didn't know the answer. So we're wondering, how come Rava, who knew the answer, he explained that this machloket, right, these 2 rabbis fit together, and those 2 rabbis fit together. How come Rav Papa had a quandary about it? Rav Papa is actually the student of Rava. So here was Rav Papa's 2 sides. The first one is going to be exactly what Rava said, and then we're going to see a different way of interpreting it. Rav Tane Chaser Kortob Baresha. Did Rav have less than Kortob, the words Chaser Kortob in the Resha, which we do, right? We have right here, Chaser Kortob, that the Mishnah is talking about a case where it's 2.9, and that's why it's okay, it's permitted. Aval Shelosha Login LeTanakama Pasli. But according to Tanakama, if you started off with 3 full log of water and then added a little bit of wine, then it's no good, because you started with there's 3 or more of water. Is that how he has it? Ve'atar Rabbi Yochanan lememar hakol oloch achar hamar'eh. Ve'Rav omer ki Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. And Rabbi Yochanan comes to be lenient and says, listen, I just follow what it looks like. And even if you started off with 3 full lugin, but it looks like wine, then you follow the wine, it's wine. And then in that reading, Rav would follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. That's exactly what Rava said. So Rav Papa was wondering, is that the correct interpretation? Or, and here's a new way of reading it, maybe in Rav's version of the Mishnah, these words chaser kortob were not there. And if you follow this reading without the words chaser kortob, that would mean that Tanakama is taking the most lenient position possible. He's saying, even if you start off with a full 3 log of water, and then you add a little bit of wine, and it looks like wine, now we define the whole thing as wine, and even if it falls into the mikveh, that's permitted. That's permitted because it looks like wine. And the other case is also permitted if you start off with as long as you start off with less than 3 and you add milk, even though it looks like water. And now the milk that you added to it fills it up to 3 login. So now you have 3 and it looks like water. That's still permitted because you started off with 2.9. So either or, you're okay. Either if you start off with 3 but it looks like wine, as long as it looks like wine, it's called wine and that's fine. Or if it looks like water, but you started off with less than 3, that's also fine. So that is Tanakama is lenient. And that is consistent with Rav, because Rav also said, even if you start with 3 and you add wine, and now it looks like wine, that's permitted. So that's how Rav would read the Tanakama. And then Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri ki palig asefa hu de palig. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is coming to be a little bit more machmir, and he's going to be machmir on the sefa. And he's saying, no, listen, we have to follow the color, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, I'll agree regarding the wine because it looks like wine, so we call the whole thing wine. But in the sefa, since it looks like water, even though you started with 2.9, that doesn't matter. Now you have 3, including the milk. And the whole thing looks like water, so we add it all up, and it all looks like water, and it's no good. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is only machmir on the second case, but he is in agreement regarding the first case. If you read it all this way, without those 2 words, then V'Rav Damar ki divrei hakol, and then Rav's ruling could be according to everyone, Tanakama and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. That was the quandary that Rav Papa had. So how come Rav Papa didn't know, is it read this way or that way? But Rava seemed to for sure know. So how come Rav Papa was still asking? And the answer is simple. Rav Papa wasn't sure, Rava was sure. Even though Rav Papa is a student of Rava, and Rava gave that answer, Rav Papa said, maybe that is possible, but I wonder, maybe you could read it otherwise. So now we actually see 2 answers, and then we're going to see Rav Yosef, who actually is going to follow the other side of the controversy that Rav Papa brings up. Rav Yosef, La shemi'a li ha shema'ata. Rav Yosef says, I never heard this halacha. Rav Yosef, in his older age, forgot a lot of his learning. So he says, I never learned this. Amar la Abaye, at amart la nihalan, ve'achi amart nihalan. Derav la tane chaser korto beresha. Ve'Rabbi Yochanan asefa palig. Ve'Rav damar ki divrei hakol. And Abaye reminds Rav Yosef, his teacher, and he says, you taught this to us, and this is what you said. By reminding Rav Yosef what he had taught, you said that Rav did not have the words chaser kortob in the resha of the Mishnah. And therefore, Rabbi Yochanan, when he argues, he's only machmir on the sefa. He disagrees regarding the case of milk because it all looks like water, so you have to follow the color. And if it looks like water, then we consider the whole thing water. But in terms of the resha, everybody agrees that even if it's 3 full log of water, but you add wine, and now it looks like wine, then you call it wine, and everyone agrees with that, and Rav is following the opinion of all of the Tanaim. Next, we have one last halacha, also in the name of Rav Yudah, in the name of Rav. Amar Rav Yudah Marav, Chavit mele'a mayim, shenafla layam hagadol, hatovel sham lo alta lo tevila, chashinan lishlosha lugin, shelo yehu b'makom ehad. It's related to the previous law about mikvah. If you have a barrel full of water, some have wine here, but let's say water, that fell into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, the Mediterranean Sea is a kosher mikveh, like any ocean would be, or any sea would be. Now, someone goes to the mikveh there in the very spot where the barrel full of water was just spilled. That tevilah is not a kosher tevilah. Why? Because we are afraid that there are 3 log of drawn water. If it was in the barrel, that's drawn water by definition, that they are still in the same spot because the Mediterranean Sea does not move around a lot. It's not a flowing river. And so, if it just spilled in that spot, and then someone goes to the mikveh right in that spot, then it's likely that there are still 3 logim of drawn water that haven't yet gotten mixed up and touched all the rest of the water, and therefore that tevilah is not kosher. You got to wait till it mixes around a little. But this is only true regarding the Mediterranean Sea, that it's stagnant, just sits there. But if it's something that's flowing, a regular river, then that would be okay, because as soon as it goes in, the river water is touching everything all over, and then that is totally kosher. Some people wonder, because actually, if you take drawn water, as soon as some of it touches the rest, then it all becomes called kissing, even if it's just even from a small tube that is in between, like a mikveh next to another pool, and there's some this water that's flowing in between would be sufficient. And so people wonder about that. So as soon as the drawn water from the barrel, any of it touches, then all of it should be okay. And that's why some people say maybe it should be wine, because if it's wine, then wine is not good for a mikveh. No matter how much wine you have, it has to get all mixed in. And that is in fact what it would seem from the next baraita that we use to prove it. Tanyan mehachi chavit melea yayin shenafla lehem hagadol tevel sham lol alta lo tebila chashinan l'shosha login שיעובין שלא יהיו במקום אחד, וכן כיכר של תרומה שנפל שם טמא. A baraita teaches the same ruling as Rav, that if you have a barrel full of wine that falls into the Mediterranean Sea, it gets all spilled out, and then, in that moment, someone goes and goes to the mikveh right there, right in the middle of the wine where it spilled. So that is not a good tevilah. Why? Because we worry that there are 3 lugin of. It's not just the problem is not just that it's drawn; it's also that it's wine. And so wine is not going to, by touching the rest of it, become kosher for a mikveh, because it's not water. It's not going to be good at all until it disperses. And so that's the problem, and so that supports Rav. And similarly, if you have a loaf of tirumah that's tahor and falls into that spot, and let's say the wine was tameh, then that not only does this not count as a mikveh to take a person who is tameh and make him tahor, it even takes a piece of bread that was tirumah and was tahor and will make it tameh if the wine was tameh, because by touching that wine, it becomes tameh until it moves around and it gets all mixed in, and then it will be a mikveh, and then you could use it again. Mai v'chen. Now, why we ask about this baraita? Why is it after the word v'chen? What is this coming to add? We just said it's not a kosher mikveh, so it doesn't make the tameh person tahor, so that means the wine is still intact, so then it's going to be tameh. Why do you have to add this? Because I might have thought that the person that was tameh, that goes in, I would have thought, listen, since we're not sure about this, because we don't know if the wine is all in one spot or it mixed around, so since the person was tameh, we'll continue his status quo, his chazakah, and assume he's still tameh, even though he dunked, because we're not sure if there was 3 login of wine all in the same spot, and it's no good. And regarding terumah, I might have thought that terumah bread was tahor, so maybe also we should continue its presumptive status, the status quo, and it was tahor, and now it fell in to that spot. Maybe we should follow the status quo and continue to say it's tahor. That's what I might have thought, because we're not really sure if all the wine is gathered in one spot or not. And that's why the baraita adds v'chen to teach us, no, not only will this not count as a mikveh to make a tameh person tahor, we even assume fully that the wine is still in that spot, and if the wine was tameh, it will make something that was tahor tameh. Next Mishnah. Meridin anu beish piloni shechayav lachavero 200 zuz v'nimseu zomemin lokin u'meshalamin shelo Hashem hamevi'an lidei makot mevi'an lidei tashlumin divrei Rabbi Meir. If 2 witnesses come and they say this person has to pay that other person 200 zuz, we were there when he borrowed it and he has to pay it back. And then turns out that those 2 witnesses are edim zomemin. So, according to the Rabbi Meir, they actually get 2 punishments. One, they have to pay 200 zuz. That's the regular law of edim zomemin that we learn from Devarim chapter 19. But there's another one, and that is the 9th commandment of the 10 commandments that says, Lo ta'aneh bere'acha ayet shaker. You can't be a false witness. This is a lav. And being a lav, one gets malkut for violating it. And indeed, you can even get 2 punishments for one act, according to the Rabbi Meir. Hachamim say no. There's a general rule that you only get 1 punishment for a single act. And in this case, since they are adim zomemin, they have to pay the 200 zuz, and they do not get lashes. And now another case, it's going to have the same machloket. What if 2 witnesses come and say, this person did something for which he is liable 40 lashes. So it turns out that they are adim zomemin. Those adim zomemin are going to get 80 lashes, 40 because they violated the 9th commandment, lo ta'aneh berachat shaker, and 40 because they violated vasitem lo kasher zamam. They tried to get the defendant to have 40 lashes, so they get 40 lashes. And yes, you can give 2 punishments and 2 sets of 40 lashes. Hachamim omrim en lokin el arba'im. Hachamim say, no, you don't get the double punishment, only 40 lashes for the vasitem lo kasher zamam, and one does not get lashes for lo ta'aneh berachat shaker. The Gemara will analyze. Bishlama l'Rabbanan kedei rish'ato ketib, mishum rish'a achat ata mechayevo ve'i ata mechayevo mishum shete rish'iyot. So we understand the reasoning of Rabbanan because the pasuk regarding giving lashes says that the judge will put him down and beat him according to his measure of wickedness. Rishato is singular, his wickedness. So because it says it in singular, that means that there's only 1 punishment. You can only give 1 punishment for 1 act. And you can't have 1 act with 2 punishments and make him pay and give him lashes. No, rishato. If you're giving him lashes, then that's the only punishment that you can give him. And so we don't give him 2 punishments. So that's what Rabbanan say. You have to pick one or the other. And because this guy is ed zomem, so that law takes precedence, and he gets whatever the reciprocal punishment, whatever he was going to do to someone else, that's the punishment that he gets. And the lo ta'aneh berachat shaker, that, no, you can't give 2 punishments. In any case, as we're going to discuss, that's a lav she'en bo ma'aseh. So you only get the ed zomem punishment. So we understand the source of Rabbanan. How about Rabbi Meir? He says you do get 2 punishments. What's his source? Amar Ula, Gamar b'mosi shem ra, ma mosi shem ra lokeh u'mishalem, af kol lokeh u'mishalem. Ula says we can learn it from the law of mosi shem ra. This is after a husband and wife get married. If the husband comes the next day after they consummate their marriage and they say, listen, I thought I was marrying a betulah, but in the night I did not see any betulim. And it turns out he was lying. There actually was betulim. He just was trying to get out of the full ketubah payment. In that case, he gets lashes and he has to pay 100 coins. So we see Mosi Shem Ra gets lashes and pays, even though he only did 1 sin. He still gets 2 punishments, and so Ula says that's the source for the Rabbi Meir, that there are cases where you can get 2 punishments. Now we challenge that. Mala Mosi Shemra sheken kenas. Hold on, Mosi Shemra, that's a kenas. He has to pay, right, a fixed amount, which is a fine. So maybe because it's a fine and not damages. But if it was damages and lashes, then you couldn't get 2. So you can't prove that from what Ula said from Mosi Shemra. And the answer is you can, because Sabar la Rabbi Akiba damar adim zomemin kenasahu. Rabbi Meir agrees with Rabbi Akiba, who we said in previous daf that according to Rabbi Akiba, the payment that Ed Zomem gives is in fact a fine, because where else would we see that there's no damage to the defendant? Since they were found to be false witnesses, the defendant never paid anything. The money is still in his pocket, and yet the witnesses have to pay. So therefore, we define it as a knas. And since this is a fine, and the Mosi Shemra is also a fine, so it's a very good source. And that's the source for Ula, that there are cases where you can pay and also get lashes. Okay, but that's a good answer. Now we have another version of Ula. This statement that Ula said, a lot of times, this is very interesting. The statement of an Amorah is transmitted on its own. Ula said, Gama mimosi Shem Ra. That's what he said. But what did Ula say it about? Sometimes we're not sure, did he say it in this context or in that context, or he said it in one and we apply it to the other. So, in what we just saw, Ula applies Gama mimosi Shem Ra to this answer to figure out a source for Rabbi Meir. However, there are some who remember the words of Ula, same words, but they apply them to another context where it also makes sense. So let's see this new context. Tanya, lo totiru mimenu ad boker v'anotam mimenu ad boker v'gomer, regarding Korban Pesach. The people who appointed themselves to be part of this particular Korban Pesach have to eat the whole thing at night. That's how long you have. You have until the morning. And you shouldn't leave any leftovers. If you leave leftovers, then you violate this lo ta'aseh, lo totiru. However, if you did, the Torah also gives a b'di'avad. If you leave any till the morning, then you have to burn it in fire. Ba katuv liten aseh achar lo ta'aseh. Lomar she'en lokin alav diber Rabbi Yehuda. The Torah comes and says in aseh after lo ta'aseh. Lo ta'aseh, do not leave any leftovers until the morning. And now, if you did violate that lo ta'aseh, normally you would get lashes, because lo ta'aseh, right, with that doesn't specify the punishment. The lo ta'aseh is lashes. However, Rabbi Yehuda says, in this case, it gives you a way out, and says, oh, if you did leave it over till the morning, then burn it. And that way, by burning it, that you took care of it, and there's no other punishment, there's no punishment of lashes. That's how Rabbi Yehuda understands this pasuk. Rabbi Akiva Omer, lo min Hashem hu zeh, ela mishum tavale elav she'en bo ma'aseh, v'chol lav she'en bo ma'aseh, en lokin alav. Rabbi Akiva says, I agree that there's no lashes for leaving leftovers of the Passover sacrifice until the morning, but not because of your reason that there's an aseh following the law ta'aseh, so there's a way to make it up, there's a way to take care of it, not because of that, but rather because of a more general rule, that this is a negative commandment where there's no action involved. And anytime you have a negative commandment that does not involve an action, there is no lashes. Unlike eating pig, where that's an action. You're eating pig, okay, you get lashes. Here, it's passive. There's some meat on the bones there, and people, they fell asleep, they were full, and they left it over. So that, and the second sunrise comes, then one violates, but one doesn't do anything actively, one violates passively. And so that's why Rabbi Akiva says one does not get lashes, because it's passive, there's no action here. Okay, so now Rabbi Akiva says this is the reason. Mekelal de Rabbi Yehuda sabar, lav she'en bo ma'aseh lokin alav, minale. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, he would not agree with this reason. If it was just because the fact that it has no action, no, there in general, alav she'en bo ma'aseh, you would get lashes. And that's why he needs the other reason. It's only because an aseh comes after, that's why you don't get lashes. So we see that this is in fact subject to machloket, whether you can have lashes on a lav she'en bo ma'aseh. Now we ask, what is the source of Rabbi Yehuda to say that lav she'en bo ma'aseh, you still get lashes? Amar Ula, gamar mimosi Shem Ra. Here's where Ula said this. So we have the same little phrase that Ula said, and we can apply it here, and we can apply it also in this context. So here's how it works. Ma mosi Shem Ra lav she'en bo ma'aseh lokin alav. Af kol lav she'en bo ma'aseh lokin alav. Just like mosi Shem Ra is a negative prohibition that has no action. There's no action. This guy, the husband, he just came and testified. He said words and said, oh, my bride, she had no betulim. That's not an action. That's just words. So there's no Mosi Shem Ra, that's lav she'en bo ma'aseh, and yet the Mosi Shem Ra does get lashes. He has to pay and also gets lashes. Therefore, we can learn from here, and this is Rabbi Yehuda's source, that other cases of lav she'en bo ma'aseh, one gets lashes. So that's the source. But now we challenge it. Hold on, you can't learn from Mosi Shem Ra. It has an extra stringency that you get two punishments for one sin. And generally, you don't get two punishments for one sin. So maybe that's why it's different that you get Malkut, even though En Bo Maaseh, because it's a very stringent case. Okay, so then Ula doesn't work, at least doesn't work alone. Ela Amar Resh Lakish, Gamar Me'edim Zomamin. Resh Lakish will bring a different source, and then we're going to combine the two together. And he says we learn it from the law of Edim Zomamin. Okay, so even though we started off, Ula says this in a different context, we ended up coming back to our context anyway. Ma edim zomin lav she'en bo ma'aseh lokin alav, av kol lav she'en bo ma'aseh lokin alav. Just like edim zomin is a negative commandment for which there is no action, it's only testimony, it's only saying words, that's not called action. So too, all lav she'en bo ma'aseh, one does get lashes. And that's the source for Rabbi Yehuda to say that in general that's true too. But we challenge that. Hold on. Edim zomin has an extra stringency that you don't really require a forewarning. Usually to give someone lashes, you see someone about to eat pig. Hey, don't you know that's not kosher, you're not allowed to eat that, and if you eat that you're going to get lashes. He has to say, yes, I know, I'm doing it anyway. Most cases require that there be a warning. But edim zomin, you don't have to tell the edim zomin. You should know if you're lying and other people come and say that you were with them in Chicago, then you're going to get lashes. They get punished anyway. But that's an extra stringency. So maybe the stringency of having lashes for lav she'en bo ma'aseh in edim zomin is only because this is an extra stringent law, because we see from the fact that there is no hatra'ah. So that by itself also is not a good source. Mosi Shem Ra yochiach. But let's bring Mosi Shem Ra, because there you do need a hatra'ah. Ve'chazar hadin. Lo re'izeh k're'izeh. Ve'lo re'izeh k're'izeh. Hasada shaveh shabahen lav she'en bo ma'aseh ve'lokin alav. Af kol lav she'en bo ma'aseh lokin alav. What we see is that these two cases are not like the other. Each one is lacking that special stringency that the other does have, and therefore we can cancel them out. Because in the case of Mosi Shem Ra, you do need hatra'ah, and in this case you get Mosi Shem Ra, you get two punishments, but not edim zomin. Is only one punishment. So we see that this stringency and that stringency are not the key factors that are making it so stringent that you get lashes for something that has no action, and therefore we can look at the common denominator between the two laws, and the common denominator between the two laws is that they are lav she'en bo ma'aseh, and you do get lashes, and therefore that's the Rabbi Yehuda's source that in general a lav she'en bo ma'aseh lokin alav. But we challenge this also. Those two laws are both a kenas. Both Mosi Shem Ra is a kenas, right? It's 100 zuz no matter what. And edim zomin is also a kenas. You can't learn that to other cases where it's not a kenas. There's no problem here. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Akiva. Only Rabbi Akiva said that ed zomem, paying money, is a kenas. Others thought that it's damages. You were seeking to cause this person damages, even though he didn't actually have to pay. But still, we define the payment of the edim zomin as damages, and therefore that is not common between the Mosi Shem Ra and edim zomin. One is damages, one is not. And so therefore, this two-pronged proof stands, and that is the source of Rabbi Yehuda. Wait, one last question. We could still reject the proof because both Mosi Shem Ra and edim zomin have a common denominator in that they have a stringency, the stringencies that we said before. And so maybe, therefore, they are in the class alone, and that's why you get lashes even though there is no action, and you can't learn that to other things that don't have a similar stringency. And the answer to that is Rabbi Yehuda, sad chamor la parich. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you can't just bring a very general thing like there is a stringent aspect. It's true, each one has a stringent aspect, but the stringent aspect of this is not like the other one. This one has two punishments. That one doesn't need a hatra'ah. But those are two different types of stringencies, and therefore they do not come into account. And so, in the end, both these two laws together can be a derivation that in general, according to the Rabbi Yehuda, lav she'en bo ma'aseh, one does get lashes. V'Rabbanan, hai lo ta'aneh b're'acha ed shaker mai darshi be. What do Rabbanan do with this pasuk? We know what Rabbi Meir does with it. He says this pasuk means that false witnesses get 40 lashes in addition to another punishment. But Rabbanan say, no, you only get one punishment, which means in the case of payment, they only pay, and they don't get lashes. In that case, what do we learn from this pasuk, the 9th commandment? ורבי מאיר, אזהר על עדים זוממים מנעלה, אמר רבי ירמיה, נפקא לה, והנשארים ישמעו ויראו, ולא יוסיפו עוד. Rabbanan will use this pasuk as a warning for edim zomim. Whenever the Torah says that a certain sin has a punishment, so it has to have a pasuk that tells us the punishment, but it also needs another pasuk that gives us the warning. So this would be the warning, Lo tani b'rasha et shakir, don't be a false witness. And then the pasukim regarding edim zomim say kasher zamam. That's good for Rabbanan. But now we turn back to the Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, what's your source for a warning regarding edim zomim? You already need this pasuk to say that they get a set of lashes. So Rabbi Yirmiyah answers that Rabbi Meir can learn it from the continuation of the last pasuk in the edim zomim paragraph that says that everybody else will hear and fear and will not continue to act in this evil, and you'll get rid of the evil in your midst. And so from this pasuk that says "V'lo yosifod," they won't do it again. That's the warning for the prohibition of edim zomim. Rabbanan, what are they going to do with this pasuk? Hahu mi'ba'aleh lahachraza. We learn from this that one has to make a proclamation. Whenever the court is going to bring someone out for execution, you have to have a public proclaimer go next to the person who's going to be killed and announce, hey everybody, Mr. So-and-so is going to be killed with this death penalty because he did this and that. And that way, everybody will yishme'u v'yirau. How are they going to hear if no one says it? So you need someone who's going to proclaim it, and that we learn it from this pasuk. V'Rabbi Meir hachraza mishme'u v'yirau nafka. Now, Rabbi Meir, where is he going to learn this law of proclaiming? Oh, he can learn it also from the same words, yishme'u v'yirau, that people will hear, and from the rest of the pasuk, v'lo yosifu od, and then no one will do that evil again. That's where he learns the warning for the prohibition of edim zomim. Baruch Adonai leolam. Amen ve'amen.